Okay, oh, there we go. Hi, my name is Liz Repking. I want to first thank District 200 for having me. I've done a number of things with District 200, and I am always so grateful for their belief and their support of this topic, belief in me and support in this topic. Thank you also to the Parent Association and to Studio Movie Girl for doing this. It's a fantastic opportunity for all of you. And then finally, I want to thank all of you for coming and taking the time and making the investment in, hello? Okay. Taking the time and making the investment in this topic. I am a parent of 3 that I'll tell you about in a minute, and I know what it's like to try and get out the door at 6 o'clock. I was making dinner at 3:30. I was trying to get one to a soccer practice. I was trying to get another one home from cross-country practice, and then trying to get here. So I know what a commitment it is to take 2 hours or 2.5 hours to come tonight. Hopefully you were able to buy your dinner and have a drink and relax a little bit. So to tell you a little bit about me before we get into the discussion about this, I live in Glen Ellen, and I have 3 children. I have a son, Camden, who's a sophomore at Marquette. I have a son, Ian, who's a junior at Lombard West. And then I have Tessa's in the movie. I have Maeve, who is 13 years old and in 8th grade at St. Petronelle. I started a company 5 years ago called Cyber Safety Consulting for a number of reasons. But the main one was that I was living what all of you are living. And I felt like there was a great disconnect between the level of information out there that people would come and talk to you about, but then the bridge to how do we do this as parents? How do we have these on that? So I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about what I do. I want to talk more about this movie. This is about the 4th time that I've had the privilege of moderating this. I've watched this movie 7 times. And every time I take notes, and my notes are different because I go back and I look at them before I come, and then I sit and I take new notes. And today what struck me was this movie makes me happy and sad all at the same time. It is such an accurate depiction of what the challenges are, both for our kids as well as for us as parents. They're not the extreme case of a kid who is being highly cyberbullied, while those situations exist. They're not an extreme case of a kid who's being groomed by a predator. All very relevant topics, but they're more kind of the middle of the road, the everyday challenges that the kids are facing and that we are facing as parents. So it always makes me feel good that there is information out there that brings in almost 400 parents to see this and to talk about it. It makes me sad in some ways because it reminds me of what a challenging world it is that they're living in. When you hear Tessa's responses to some of these questions, it makes me go, wow, I've heard that 100 times, but I don't want to hear it because I don't want to know it. I want to stick my head in the sand and know that my 13-year-old doesn't want a phone so that she can look at it when she feels awkward. You know, I want to know my 13-year-old can stand up, but that's not the reality. She's a 13-year-old girl who struggles with, my own daughter struggles with a lot of anxiety. And so it's interesting to hear that, but it's a reminder of how challenging the world is. So I always start by saying, there's a million different messages in that movie that are all so accurate. And every time I watch it, something different, depending on where I'm at with my own children, resonates with me. The first time I watched it was the gaming. My oldest son is a gamer. And when he was a senior in high school, I left him, I'll never forget it, it was a spring Friday afternoon. I left the house at 4:30, it was bright and shiny, he was playing some first, shooter game. And I said, I'll be back in a couple hours, and I came back at 8:30, it was pitch black in the room. He hadn't moved, he hadn't eaten, and he was still gaming. And I came in and I said, Cam, and I wasn't mad, I just was kind of astounded. Cam, have you moved? And he went, what time is it? I said, it's 8:30. I was gone for 4 hours. Did you eat? And he's like, oh, no. Gosh, I lost track of time. There was not a malicious, defiant tone in his voice. He truly lost track of time. And I'm thinking, I am sending him to college next year. He is on his own. There's no one to come home and say, hey, turn it off, get your homework done. Not that I'm yelling at him, but just gently reminding him. And on top of that, I'm paying $40,000 to see how this goes. So that was very scary. And then all the science behind that. This time when I watched it, two things jumped out at me. One was Tessa. The looks, I feel like a lot of aspects of Tessa are Maeve right now. And Maeve has a piece of garbage phone that we got her in 6th grade. That was step one into the phone. And now she's on me about how embarrassing, like all these things, how embarrassing her phone is. And she can't do this. And well, I'm not even gonna take my phone because there's no charge, because it does, and it's the looks and the tone. And I just think, isn't a phone a privilege at the age of 13? So there's that we're dealing with in my house as well. And then the other thing that jumped out at me, and it was actually more jumped out at me, was towards the beginning. Do you remember the young man who said, when I go out with my friends and they put their phones on the table, he said, it makes me feel like they're waiting for something else when I'm out with them. And to hear someone else's perspective sometimes makes me go, I do that when I go out with my friends. I take my phone, I put it on the table, and does it send a message, even us as adults, that yeah, I want to have dinner with you and I enjoy you, but there's something else that might be better, that I might have to know about. And aside from something happening to my children or my mother or my husband, there's probably nothing more important than that. So with that, I'm going to sort of throw it out to you, and don't leave me hanging here, for some questions and answers. There's a lot of things I could talk about, but I want to let you all drive that discussion. Yes? I'm going to give you this microphone though, so everyone can hear you.
One of my sons says that my husband and I are the only parents that he knows of that set limits on screen time. How do I respond to that?
Well, first of all, congratulations for doing that. Second of all, you're not. But that's not what he wants to hear. I mean, kids are really smart, and they know how to play us. And they know how to bring us into, I call it like the toilet bowl. They want to get you circling and get you emotional. So, I think it's one of those things that you just stay firm and say, like, here's what I do. When these topics come up, I don't let them flip my switch. That was pretty cool. I am so cognizant of my tone of voice, and I stay very calm on this topic, because it's an emotional topic for them, and it's an emotional topic for us. If you believe in what you're doing, if you believe your limits are fair, I just say, wow, I'm really sorry about that. Or, oh, really? And I don't throw gasoline on the flame, because they're looking for gasoline. But if you know you're not going to bend on that, then just kind of possibly agree and move on. One thing I would offer is that I would ask him, like I really believe she had a great point with Tessa. When she first presented that contract in the first half of the movie, she got a lot of sarcasm. I would have just like taken the phone, but Tessa's like, the 4 pages, I gotta show this to all my friends. But then at one of the very last scenes, when the father was asking her input, she had a totally different demeanor. Did you notice that? She was a pleasant young lady, and she joked and she laughed and he gave to get. So that's what I would ask you, is there a place where you can give? You have to go into that conversation knowing what you will give and what you won't, because you don't want them to manipulate you. But if you can figure out a place where you're willing to give, it'll give them a feeling of ownership and empowerment. So one thing I recommend with families, depending on how old your children are, is developing what I call a digital roadmap, or a plan in advance of getting knee deep into this problem. Depending on where you are with the age of your children will drive how much you can put into this digital roadmap. But it's like when I was little and we went on vacation, it involved a car. I'm the youngest of 10 children. There was not a lot of jumping on airplanes to go skiing somewhere. It was, we're gonna go visit your cousins in New York, get in the car. But what we always did before we got in the car is we called AAA. Does anyone know where I'm going with this? And we told them our start and our end, and then about a week later, this wonderful book came with the fold-out pages with the route highlighted. And that's what I want to do with technology. I want to highlight the route that you want to take from the time they're in 5th grade, from things like, when will I give them a phone? What are the rules around that phone? How much data will I allow them to have? When do they have to turn it in at night? There's a lot of questions you can answer, and that's the part you figure out. When should they be up? I always say up for social media, like up for parole. You're eligible for social media at the age of 13. That means when you turn 13, we'll talk about it and see if you're ready for it. So you can plan all that out, and it does a couple things for you. One is, it helps prevent the creep. How many of you have more than one child? There's this thing called creep. With our oldest, like think about when they were little. I'm only gonna let them watch 1 hour of TV a week. By the time you get to the 3rd child, you're just happy they're quiet, right? Because I'm telling you, I've lived it, because I told you I'm the youngest of 10. As long as the police didn't bring me home, my parents didn't care, because they had older kids and bigger fish to fry than whether I was watching an hour of the Brady Bunch or 4 hours of Laverne and Shirley. So it helps you be consistent because you've made that plan and it's kind of written down. You can deviate from your plan. That's one of the benefits. The other is, kids come to you at the absolute worst time. Right? If you say you cannot have Snapchat, they will come to you when you are stressed and busy and say, can I get Snap? You know what? Christy got it, and I'm officially the only one in school now who doesn't have Snapchat. And they'll wear you down. And some of us end up going, fine, just get it, because I got other things to do. Or they'll say, can I get this new app, and it's, Fruit Ninja kills the butterflies, or something ridiculous. And you look at them and you say, well, what is that app? I've done this. I'm asking the petitioner to explain to me the app, and then I followed up with even a better question. Well, is it safe? I've never had my children say, no, it's really dangerous. So it allows you to think through very big decisions, have conversation with the other people that are driving these things in your house, your spouse, and get on the same page. Because the other thing that happens is that you saw it in the movie. She said, these are violent games, I don't want my kid playing it. And then the dad's like, what's the big deal? He's not gonna go be a shooter. So it helps you get on the same page. And then the third thing that I love is that it sets your kids' expectations. You can walk them through. Maeve did not bug me for Snapchat because she saw it with her 2 brothers that they weren't up for it until they were 13. Sure, most of last year when she was 12, she would say, well, Claire got Snapchat. I'm officially the only one. And I'd just look at her and I go, oh, that was it. Oh, okay. This is the rules. So think about, you can call it digital roadmap, you can call it a plan, but that's one suggestion I have that helps you think it through when you're calm, cool, and collected. And then, back to your point, it helps you set those limits. And if your kids are at the right age and you're comfortable, you can, like they did, sit down and let your children participate in the development of it. When should we have tech-free time in the house? Well, let's do it on Sunday nights. What's tech-free space? So you can let them participate on that. So, I'm sure I answered your question at this point, and then some. Any more? We just started. Another question.
Got the mic, let me. Thank you, that was a long way from my. Do you recommend any apps that can limit the time on screens that kids can't hack within a minute?
No. I mean, there is nothing, so basically the question is, in a big general sense, monitoring. How do you monitor? How do you use technology to help you? There is nothing that will replace parenting. I said this to, I work with a private client in Washington, D.C. She's very wealthy, and she has people that do everything for her. And it's been a really challenging process to get her to understand that this is not technology with her kids is not something that she can outsource to another person. This is a parenting issue. Are there good technologies that are more difficult than others? Yes. One that I like is Circle by Disney. Write that down. And I'm gonna back up a little bit before I talk about that. There's sort of two streams of thought with monitoring. The first one is monitoring things that are going through your Wi-Fi, your iPads, phones when they're in the house, computers, laptops. Anything that's accessing that Wi-Fi, you can monitor it at the network level. And it allows you to do some things like set limits. Circle by Disney allows you to set limits and monitor each device individually. If I were talking to you maybe 2 years ago, I would have told you that if you were monitoring at the Wi-Fi at the network level, it was sort of a one-size-fits-all. Whatever limits you set on that network went for every device. But we've progressed, and now Circle by Disney is this little square box that you pay $89.99 for. And you put it next to your router, and it immediately pairs with your router, so it connects to that. You download an app onto your phone, and then on that app, it shows you every device that's going through the router. Then you can go into each device and manage what you want for that. So if you have a 16-year-old that's doing homework and you say, I want them to have no more access to their apps or to the internet at midnight or 11 o'clock when they're done with their homework, you can do that. If you have an 8-year-old that you say, I want it off at 8 o'clock, you can do that. You can also see what's interesting about Disney is that it allows you to see they call it insights, and you can see how much time they're spending on YouTube, on Snapchat, on Netflix, and then you can manage time. You can set limits for each app, which I think is really interesting. And it becomes helpful if they're using that device for homework. Because the challenge a year or two ago was, well, if I shut them down on their internet, they're going to tell me, and we saw it in the movie, that they need it for their homework. And they do. But then they flip over to ESPN, or they go play a game where the kid said, I just go, and as soon as my mom comes over and I say I'm doing a math problem. So it gives you a little bit more help with that. The second path of monitoring is mobile devices. So with Circle by Disney, as soon as they get smart enough to know that if they just get off the Wi-Fi and use their data plan, they're free and clear of that. So there's monitoring software that allows you to manage a mobile device. So it's not tied to the network, it's tied to the data. And one thing that's pretty good for that is something called TeenSafe. I'm gonna move over again. TeenSafe. They give you almost all of the softwares that monitor mobile devices. Most of them will give you a free trial for 7 days. One thing to think about, they all have pros and cons, they all have weaknesses, and I go back to it can't replace parenting and it can't replace education. So if I had a long time to talk to you, one message I would really push through is that we have to educate them, because they will get around software. They will add apps that you don't know about. They will. They will get a second Instagram account that you don't know about. So while we do want to monitor and try and keep them safe and use monitoring to educate them, we have to educate them, because the goal is to take them from, I look at the age of my children, 13 to 19. The 13-year-old needs more monitoring. She needs more guidance. She needs more help in recognizing situations. But then I have a 16-year-old. He's a year and a half away from going to college. I'm trying to kind of lift the controls on him and see how he does with some safety nets in place. And then I got the 19-year-old who is, according to him, on his own. I'm still paying the cell phone bill, but I don't have any controls on him anymore. So it's that continuum of trying to get them from a place of being young to a place where they can self-regulate and self-protect. Because they're gonna have to self-protect at some point online. So we want to use the tools to help get them there and keep them safe. So I would look at Circle by Disney for in-home stuff, and don't ever come back to me and say, you said this was great, because none of them are great. They all have strengths and then some weaknesses. I'll say one more thing about monitoring iPhones. So you have iPhones and you have Androids primarily. And software that monitors, and if any of you have heard me speak maybe a year and a half ago, I said don't buy your kids an iPhone because there's nothing out there that will allow you to monitor them. I will only buy my children Androids because I can put things like my mobile watchdog on it, and I can see their tax, and I can see what apps are on, and I can see what websites they're using, I can see what pictures they're sending, and so forth. There is now software for iPhones, or almost all of them do, but the way the operating system requires the monitoring to work is that you have to back up the phone to the cloud, and then the software pulls the data from the cloud. So when you're monitoring an iPhone or an iPad, you are only getting the most recent data from the last backup. So you gotta make sure the device is being backed up every night or you're getting old data. Does that make sense? With an Android, it's all real time. Like if he sent a text now, I would see it. And they all have apps that allow you to manage it from your own phone. So another question. Yes? You'll have to wait for someone to run to the mic with a microphone.
Just tell me about Snapchat. What are negatives? What do I need to look for?
I wish I had a great answer. It's going to come back to education because you really have no visibility. Why do they like it so much? Is it because you can't see it? Probably that's part of it. But it brings me to a bigger topic. So I'm kind of using a lot of your questions to springboard into broader topics. Why do they like Snapchat? Think about it. All of their social interactions, and I say they, I mean our kids, their social lives are essentially played out online, right? And Snapchat, they feel, is a little more intimate. So when you think about Instagram, when they post something, it goes to their 787 followers to be evaluated by the world. Snapchat is almost like, in their minds, having a conversation. Because I'm only sending it to you with my comments. I will also tell you that Snapchat has, in many sense, replaced traditional texting. Does anyone have that problem with their kids? I get snaps from my kids that say, can I stay out a little later? Are you kidding me? I gotta take a picture to answer that question? Send me a text. I'll also tell you that you hear a lot about social media causing increased anxiety and depression in kids. I am being streamed, aren't I? I was gonna tell you something that had to stay in this room, but I'm gonna tell you about a friend. A friend of mine's son was dating a girl. And she broke his heart and she broke up with him. Well, she didn't break up with him. She said, I want to take a break. And so he said, okay, but he didn't know what a break was. She said, you're kind of smothering me. And he said, okay. And so he tried to figure out what that meant in terms of Snapchat, because most of their relationship, most of the communication when they're not together happens via Snapchat. And this boy called his mother from college one night, and he said, I want to let you know, Mom and Dad, that I'm putting down my phone for a week. And my friend said, okay, what's going on? He said, it's making me crazy. I said, what do you mean? She said, what do you mean? And he said, well, I don't know, and he was heartbroken. He said, I don't know what I need a break means. So I send a snap in the morning saying, have a good day, because we're just on a break, we're not broken up. And I can see through SnapMap that she opens up Snapchat. This is the amount of visibility they have into someone else's life. I see that she activates Snapchat, but she doesn't look at my Snap for 8 hours. And in those 8 hours, it just makes me crazy. Why won't she look at my Snap? What does this mean? Am I snapping too much? I can't take it, I'm putting my phone away. And I could hear the anxiety, and I thought, wow. I mean, in our day, when we broke up, we called a few times, we did a few drive-bys, and then we were kind of done. Like, if we couldn't find him, if he didn't respond to the phone call, what else did you have? But now we can see when they activate Snapchat, if they look at our Snap, if they send something back, and there's all these messages to it. The other thing I'm going to say, I'm providing you insight to Snapchat, and it's not that this is how you see what your child's sending. That's the hard part. The other thing that I think is really important to think about with Snapchat and with Instagram is that they are driving children's behaviors by numbers. Think about it. How many followers do you have on Instagram? How many likes did you get for that picture? Go to Snapchat. You have a score, which indicates how active you are, and you have streaks that tell you how many times a streak. Does everyone know what a streak is on Snapchat? So a streak is a little number that appears. So I snap with Camden at school. And if we snap each other every day, after 3 days, they start tallying that, and that's our streak. And when we get close to the 24 hours and we haven't snapped, we get a little hourglass there to tell us that we're going to lose our streak. So I asked kids, I wrote a blog about this last spring, and I said, I asked a couple different teenagers, what do you think about streaks? And one child said, I think they're really dumb because they don't mean anything. People are just sending me a picture so that we keep the streak going. He said, I've even gotten pictures of the floor as the streak, and that's pretty meaningless to me. It doesn't say anything about my friendship. Another kid said, I like them because it keeps kids accountable to the friendship. Because they have to engage with me every day. But when you think about all these numbers, especially the Snapchat stuff, it's all driven by money, right? If I can get more people to engage in that application every single day, and I can say I have 1 million daily users of Snapchat, I'm going to make more money. So while the creators of the apps are creating these things to drive their revenues, they're driving our children's self-esteem and self-worth. I have kids tell me that, and they said it in the movie too. That's how common it is that I'll put a picture up on Instagram. If it doesn't get 100 likes in 10 minutes, I'll take it down. It's not worthy. It's not good enough. It's an embarrassment to me. But what that also leads them to do is to get riskier in the next picture. Because this one of me with my dog didn't make the cut. So next time, maybe I need to show a little more and get people to like it. So there's a lot of self-worth that's being derived from those numbers. And I'm going to go into one more topic in that. One thing I want to say to you guys is that you've got to get involved in these apps. As much as you think, I don't have the time for that nonsense, I can tell you firsthand that when you can't talk to them about it, the questions start with the actual concrete picture on Instagram or Snapchat or group chat that your child's in. But if you can have a good conversation, you will be able to allow that to flow into a topic that we really do want to parent our kids on. I'm telling you, I don't want to police Instagram all my life, even though it's what I do for a living. It's not what I want to do as a parent. I want to talk to my kids about self-esteem, about relationships, about communication, about having goals, being motivated, all these things that at the end of the day is what I'm trying to instill in them to become strong, productive, happy adults. But how do we get there? I mean, sitting at the dinner table saying, let's talk about self-esteem tonight. You might as well be Charlie Brown's teacher. You know, womp, 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 womp. But when they can relate to it and it's concrete and it's something that they truly care about, the path opens up to get to those conversations. And I've had that experience a number of times. And if you're sitting there thinking, I can never have a conversation with my kid about this. They roll their eyes at me, they put their hand up, they tell me that I know nothing about anything. Do any of your kids tell you you know nothing about anything when it comes to technology? You can have the conversations. You have to do a few things. One is you have to get up to speed. Will you ever be up to speed with them? No way. They think I am. They can run circles around me, my children. But they don't know that. I know enough to have conversation, and I have credibility. So one is you have to get up to speed. Another thing you have to do is that you have to find a way to create a safe, comfortable environment for them to have the conversation. I think that this is one of the topics that they are instantly defensive on. You can come up with the nicest voice and come home tonight and say, do you have Snapchat? No! I would never do that. Or, I heard her talk about sexting. I don't sext. I didn't say you did. I just want to talk. So you have to find a way to get them to feel comfortable in the topic. So that's a whole nother discussion. Another thing that's really important is that you have to model some of it. If you're telling them to put their phone down at dinner, and every time yours beeps, you look at it, you got a problem with that. So and it's hard. I'm guilty too. The worst for me is in my car. My phone beeps and I just and my kids yell at me and I'm finally like, I gotta stop doing that, especially now that I have drivers in my house. And then set limits, which we talked about already. Set limits, which we talked about. So I don't have a great answer for Snapchat. It's really, really challenging. As far as social media, I always say start with training wheels. I mean, really, we're trying to get them to drive a Harley, but we're not going to give them the Harley right off the bat. Let's give them a tricycle, see how they do. Let's take the training wheels off on a regular bike, see how they do. Let's give them a little moped, see how they do, and graduate into that. And that's part of the digital roadmap. Happens to me all the time.
Have you watched this movie with your...
Can you flip yours off for a second, see if that helps?
Have I watched it with my children?
Have you watched this movie with your children?
No, I have not. I have not watched it with. I'm trying to yell without the microphone going on, so I don't blow you guys out. I have not watched it because all of my viewing has been around my work. I think it would be a great movie to view with your children. I have done these situations with where the kids have really been invited. It makes the discussion afterwards a little bit trickier because parents can't ask the questions they want to ask, and I'm not sure if I'm talking to the kids or to the parents, but I think it is anything you can do as a parent that generates a comfortable discussion. I mentioned that. You'll lead me into my next point is that I said, create a comfortable environment. How do you do that? I call it the third-party approach. I use a lot of articles. I use videos. And I just say, my kids laugh because I'll just come up and I'll put a piece of paper, I'll say, hey, check this out. And it's really important how you do it. You can't say, check this out, and then stand over them. So what did you think of that? Did you see what those 10 kids did? You have to give it to them and kind of walk away and not make them feel threatened and let them come to you. This is where the good conversation comes from, is when they come to you and ask a question. If they ask a question, they're interested in the answer. If you're telling them the answer before they ask the question, they don't want the answer. So videos, movies are great places to create that third-party safe environment. But you have to be able to tolerate the times that you give them the article that you think is an amazing example of good or bad digital behavior, and come back in the room and they're gone and the paper's still sitting on the kitchen table. That happens to me, and they've read it, but they don't want to talk about it. And that's okay because they get it. And I'll tell you, I'll give you an example. Do any of you remember reading a story in June about, they said a few more than 10 kids that got into Harvard had their acceptances rescinded in June? Now let's think about this. These kids got into Harvard. That means they probably applied to Princeton and Yale and Brown and all these big time schools in Stanford. And they got into Harvard and they accepted it. This is like top of the heap kids that have poured years, and their parents have poured years into getting them there. And almost every university has their own Facebook page, and once you're accepted in, you get access to that Facebook page, and you can network and connect with people, and you find your roommates, and you do all that sort of stuff. So Harvard has a Harvard Facebook page, and these kids got access to it, and they met each other, which they're supposed to do, and then they went off and they started their own Facebook page, and it was called, I think it was called Memes of Harvard. And what they did was they made derogatory and discriminatory memes of other people amongst themselves. Harvard saw it, and in June they said, you are not welcome to come here in 2 months. They had their lives were changed in a second from what they did online. So I took that article and I printed it out and I showed, I'm like, Ian, check this out. Ian's a junior. Ian's a pretty decent cross-country runner, and he's starting to get coaches looking at him, and I talk to him all the time about what he does on social media and the fact that coaches are going to be looking at it as a way to evaluate him. And he kind of read it and went, he goes, really? For memes? Memes are really common to kids. So they need to see, that's part of the challenge with this topic, is that so much of the things that are dangerous that they do online and life-changing are very culturally acceptable at their age. Sexting, well, we all sit here and go, I can't believe someone would send a picture of their breasts online. It's part of their cultural norms. I hate to say it, but it's part of their cultural norms. So getting them examples of where someone did something and what the behavior and the consequence, besides me telling them, if you use memes in a bad way, you could not get into the college you want, I get an eye roll. Yeah, I know, I've heard that. But when he reads it and he goes, are you, really? Yeah. I didn't have to say much at all. I just kind of went, yeah, I know. And the message was there. I can tell you since then, I've seen a change in his social media. He has an Instagram page, and I'm a follower along with 500 other people. And I, one night, was looking through my own Instagram, and his picture came up, and I was reading all the comments, and his very best friend, I'm not really sure if your kids, like these West suburban kids, like they want to talk like they're from the west side of Chicago. And so his friend called him, out of love and affection, his very best friend, referred to him in a derogatory term. Not meant to be abusive, just the language they use. And I read that and I thought, I'm gonna have to mention that to Ian. And the next morning, I'm like, hey, I wanted to say something to you about, and I brought it up and I look and I go, where's that comment from Nick? He goes, yeah, I deleted it. He didn't want to talk about it. He's a junior in high school. He doesn't want to talk a lot to me about his good behavior. And I said, you did? And he goes, yeah. And I could just tell. He gets the message, but he doesn't want to revel in it with me. So to answer your question, yes, it would be great to watch with them. There was a question over here. Yes?
I was wondering if you could recommend any websites or resources for parents to catch up on technology.
Yeah, I can recommend my own. What I do is blog. I would like to say I blog twice a month, but as I'm in my school busy time, I don't get to it as much. But what I blog on, I do lots of different blogs, and it's done to give you information. So, for example, when the Harvard incident happened, I write a blog and I attach the article right to that. Here's a great article to show your kids, and I might pontificate on it a little bit. I did a series of articles on monitoring software. I'll do parenting things. I did a whole series on Snapchat. And so it all varies. My website is cybersafetyconsulting.com. Probably you can go there and sign up for my newsletter, and then every time I create a new blog, I probably have some. Are you a follower? So you can attest to. When I put in new content, you get an email automatically. The other thing I would encourage you, and I'm not trying to do this to promote myself, but go to Facebook if you're on Facebook and follow my page, because more often than when I blog is I'll just find a good article or I'll find an interesting topic and I'll just post it on my Facebook. So that's another good way. Another place to look is Common Sense Media. The challenge with have any of you used Common Sense Media as a resource? It's a lot of content. If you're not incredibly comfortable with technology, it's challenging to navigate. The other thing too is, and again, I'm trying to provide. I get nervous. I'm not trying to promote myself. I'm trying to give you resources, and I've done a fair amount of private consults with people from Wheaton, from this district. But I can come in and spend some time just working with you one-on-one on the areas that are relevant for where you're at with your kids and what you want to learn too. So that's another option.
Liz? What's your Facebook or your name? Forgive me.
Cyber Safety Consulting.
So it's the same as Facebook?
Yeah, except for the .com.
Okay.
And my email is liz@cybersafetyconsulting. So I do have people who just shoot me questions. If there are things I can answer in 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, that's no problem. It's one way that I stay current. A year and a half ago, I got a bunch of questions right in a row about Musical.ly, and I had at that point didn't know anything about it, and then that's how I'm like, oh, this is a pretty hot app, and that helps me stay current as well. There was something over
I was
here.
just gonna, do you still do the thing where you will invite, like, a bunch of moms can come together and then bring their phone and
Oh,
teach them how to do Instagram and
yeah. Well, yeah, I can do small group. So if there's, if you want to get together with, I don't know, I think I did. Did you come? I think I did maybe 15 people, and it was a very specific workshop on how to navigate Instagram and Snapchat. So it has to be a little bit smaller group because I'm helping you set up an account and showing you how to move around Snapchat, which Instagram's fairly intuitive. It's kind of structured like Facebook. Snapchat, if you're not comfortable, that's like trying to read Chinese. So it helps because you cannot come home tonight and ask your kid if they're using that Snapchatting thing. That does not really promote good, healthy conversation. But I will also tell you another good way, if you get a little stronger in it, is to ask them to show you. Well, that's kind of contradictory to me saying you gotta have credibility. They love to show you. So, and I mentioned this private client in Washington, D.C. I spent the day with her on Tuesday, and my first session with her back in March, I've done a number of sessions, she sat and she told me, I think technology is all a waste of time. I don't want my children using it ever. She was so opposed to it and she was so opposed and so afraid that she wouldn't learn anything. And like I said, she just wanted me to come in and make it all better. And I pushed back hard. I said, this is parenting. You're gonna have to sit. And I told her on Tuesday, next time I come out, we're gonna sit with your phone and we're gonna navigate. And she just looked at me like I was crazy. But what I did see her do, what we did was we created a contract for her daughter, and she presented it to her daughter, and part of that contract was, I'm going to learn about the apps and websites that you're interested in. And just from where she went in March to where she is now, is amazing. So I give that to you as example. If you're sitting there thinking, I can't do this, you can. You can. It just takes a little bit. It takes being uncomfortable in a subject matter that you don't know much about, because it creates uncomfortableness and fear and intimidation and anxiety. But there's ways you can help. One great tool is YouTube. You know that thing that your kids watch constantly? It can help you. So if you want to know, how do I make sure location services is off on my phone, but I have no idea where location services is on the camera, just put it into Google, put it into YouTube. There's a video on everything. And they're really helpful from that perspective. So use Google. If your kid comes to you and says, can I get this new app, blah, 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 here's what I do. Because again, I'm you in a lot of these situations. The first thing I do is I open up my app store and I search on whatever that new app is, and I see what the age requirement is, and I see why it's rated the way it's rated, and then I read a few reviews on it. So that's kind of first level of defense is the app store. Then my second thing is that I go to Google, and my question's always the same. Is Snapchat safe for kids? What are the dangers of Snapchat, or whatever it is? And there's a lot of great resources that will pop right up for you. Yes?
This has been very helpful, and it's a very eye-opener as far as definitely preparing them for college and departure. So at what age do you start, and what do you start with? I'm kind of more of the no technology, very little technology, but I do want them to be ready.
Yeah, you have to, the no technology, because like, again, my client in DC, that was driven by her own fear. The longer you say no, the more you're pushing them to do it behind your back. And you want to have visibility into what they're doing. You want to be able to be their educator. So you have to find that line between they have the maturity, but I haven't waited too long. I can't tell you what that age is, because it's different for every family, depending on what your family, how your family operates, what your needs are. You know, there's some families that say, you know, my kid's never alone. They don't need a phone until they're going to high school. There's other families where there's 2 working parents and there's some security in their 5th grader or 6th grader having a phone. That's not for me to judge or to tell you when to do it. I can give you the information to help you make a decision that works for you and your family. What I would tell you is try and find that balance between the maturity and the idea that it's a privilege and waiting too long. I feel like it's a hard question to answer because
Can you give me like a ballpark, like?
So for like a phone?
Yeah, let's say let's start with a flip phone, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, training wheels, right? If you feel like, okay, I'm gonna give them a flip phone that doesn't have internet access.
Right. So get like a ballpark age,
Like
training
6th
wheels,
grade?
6th grade.
Yeah, I can tell you what I did. That's what I'm more comfortable with.
Okay, so tell me what you
6th
did and
grade,
how you did it.
they got very cheap, basic phones. Somewhere in around 8th grade, they got upgraded. For Cam, it was part of his 8th grade graduation. For Ian, it was a little bit earlier because his phone died before. For Maeve, it'll be this Christmas of her 8th grade year. They get that more powerful device. Now remember, when you give them that device, they can talk to anybody, anytime, anywhere in the whole world. So that's one. So there's a lot of education that comes with it. Social media is probably another one. I will tell you that my kids didn't get it till they were 13. There is a law, Child Online Privacy and Protection Act, COPPA, that says that you cannot collect marketing data on someone who is under the age of 13 years old without written parental consent. So think about that. Any of you guys use Priceline when you travel? Zappos when you buy shoes? Let's take Zappos. I go home tonight, I buy a cute pair of boots on Zappos, and then I decide I want to check my Facebook. I flip over to Facebook, guess what I have? An ad for cute shoes on Zappos. So there's this constant feed between what I'm doing online and then what's being marketed back at me through social media. And COPPA says you can't do that if someone's under the age of 13. So when they create those accounts on Snapchat or Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, they have to put a birth year that has them be 13. And it's amazing how good at math they get when they want to do that. Again, you asked the question, so I'm going to give you my personal answer, is that I feel like I'm telling my children that the rules don't apply to them. If they can lie about their age and fudge their birth year, and you know what, it doesn't matter. You can do what you want. So I was pretty hard line. Here's one benefit that I saw with Maeve. She said to me, when her birthday was in August, and about July, she started saying, well, when on my birthday, when I can get my social media, and I'm like, you mean when we can talk about your social media? Right. She said, I'm not interested in Instagram. And I said, really, why not? I thought she'd go like full boat. And she said, because I've kind of seen what people do. So that waiting year of 12 to 13, when all of her friends were on it, she sat and she kind of observed it. And she was old enough to say, I don't want to be a part of that, and mature enough. Whereas if she had started at 10 or 11, she would never have had that insight to do that. So it allowed her to kind of watch it happen and see what other kids went through as they put things on Instagram and had comments. And another big thing to consider is group chats. Any of you guys feel like the devil lives in group chats, especially with girls? Those are a challenge with younger kids. So you'll want to give some thought to, can they do group chats? Can they not? So that's what middle school is probably where you want to start putting the training wheels on.
That's very helpful. Thank
Good.
you.
By high school, I think you gotta give them some freedom with that stuff. Yes.
Any suggestions for if we're already past that point and they've had?
How do you back up the
How do
bus?
you back up and still a contact?
Yeah, no, not a single, no. No, you're done. How old are you talking about?
7th grade and
You can,
sophomore.
I'm gonna tell you, you can back the bus up. You gotta do it delicately and you can't come home tonight and strip their phone of everything they have, but you can start changing the rules. I don't mean this to sound rude. I think some of you that have heard me talk know that that's not my style, but I will say, you're the parents. You pay for that cell phone. And someone, a client in New York, she called, she said, he won't give me his phone at night. And I'm just like, take his phone. No, I can't, it's just a big fight. Okay, shut the phone off. I'm telling you, if you go to the service provider and shut the service off, they'll start working with you on how to get the service. Seriously, right? Your ultimate trump card is to turn the phone off. So that makes me think of something else I want to say. I cannot tell you enough to have you had a good question about the back the bus up, but the rest of you that don't have to back the bus up, your negotiating power is when they don't have what they want. The way she did it, she gave the phone to her for Christmas, and then a week later said, okay, now we're going to talk about a contract. I'm not a fan of giving these devices for gifts, because there's all this excitement, and who wants to be the wet blanket that says, happy birthday? Okay, here's the rules. It doesn't work. So as much as they're excited to get it, I'm a believer that you need to have the conversation. Here, I'll tell you, I love stories because I think they're a great way to learn. Maeve, in the summer after 3rd grade, she announced, I'm gonna earn enough money to buy an iPad mini. $330. And I looked at her, maybe it was 4th grade, and I looked at her, I thought, that's so cute. And she proceeded to extort money from me for everything I asked her to do. So we worked on that, but she would weed. She worked her tail off. She would weed. She would go to the neighbors and walk dogs. And for the first month, we all thought it was kind of cute. She would trade her brothers. I'll do your chores if you pay me $3. And they took it. And she was making money, and every Monday she sent me an email. She's a very industrious young girl. She sent me an email with how much she had saved and how far she was from her goal. So the first couple weeks, I'm like, this is so cute. And I'd look at it. By the end of June, I was no longer reading the emails. I was sort of fed up with negotiating everything I asked her to do. Her brothers were kind of done too because her prices kept going up. So, like any good salesperson, she found a new channel, a new sales channel, Grandma. The pay was better, and she always got a trip to Skinny Sweet on the way home. So she kept going, and finally, about the end of July, I opened up one of the emails. The subject line said, "Almost there." And I went, oh my God. Her birthday was August. She said she was at $280, and by her projection, she'd be there before her birthday, and could I front her some of the money? And I thought, wow, she's gonna buy this iPad mini, and what comes with that ownership of, well, it's mine. I bought it with my own money. So I casually one day said, you know, there's gonna be rules with that iPad. And sure enough, she turned and she's like, no, there's not. I'm buying it with my own money. And I said, no, there are. There's rules. I'm allowing you to buy that with your own money. And she went, well then I'm not buying it. And I said, yeah, you could probably buy 3 really nice American Girl dolls. First of all, she wanted to hear my flippant answer, and second of all, she felt she was far beyond American Girl dolls, so I got her. She slammed her door, went in her room, and I walked away. Because I held the power. She can't get to Target on her own. The next day she came to me and she said, what are the rules? She is a fierce negotiator. She goes, what are the rules? So she came back to the negotiating table and I said, it has to be in my hands by 9 o'clock. Okay? You can't have it in your room. Okay. I said, okay, great. And she said, but wait. And I said, what? She goes, you gotta front me the money. And I said, okay. And then once we agreed on it, we made it fun to go get the iPad. And I think I bought her a cover for her birthday or something. But if I had waited until after she bought it to say, oh, there's rules, it would have been suicide. So that would be one really big piece of advice, is the things that you haven't given them, hold them as your trump cards. And make sure you cut the deal before you allow them to have it. You can back the bus up in 7th grade. If you would have told me they're a junior in high school, I'd say it's really, really hard. Unless you have grave concerns about their safety and their use, it's gonna be a tough backup. But I think 7th grade.
The other one's though, what? How old's the older one?
Yeah, the other one's a sophomore. So.
Yeah, I think you just gotta get in the game with them and try and open up conversation and understand what they're doing. But to pull stuff back unless they're violating some rules is gonna be a lot harder.
Yeah.
So oh wow, you guys are so excited here the whole time. One last question and I'll answer it quickly, unless you guys wanna go. Any Cub updates?
What is Ford? I know 3 to 4.
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
Someone's recording it. Okay, well, thank you very much. You have my information.